So the first one's fine. It says, welcome to the KeelWorks team building course. And it says, this lesson introduces the team building course. Continue to the next slide to learn more. Now, I got to tell you that I've been rethinking this business of such a spare introduction, and we may want to add content below this, but that's to come in the future. We'll get to that later. I want you, let's scroll down on that same document so we can now see the guidance for number 2.
Okay.
Says, let's look at the guidance, oh, where'd you go? Lost you. You're really squirrely here.
AHA for number 2?
Yeah, we're looking at the LAHA for number 2, but I don't know where you're going. You're kind of jumping around a lot here.
Oh, I'm trying to figure out where you want me to go. Are you looking at module 2 or just...
Module 1, concept 2. I'm sorry, I do this all the time. Okay, there you go. Okay. So it says the learners come to a sudden realization that this course is relevant. They sense that this course can make a difference. Where some question value, most now find significant value. They see team building as more than they initially thought it was. Okay? So that's our AHA. The goal we want here is that they come to a realization, a new understanding, an epiphany. The light bulb comes on and they say, oh, okay, yeah, this is important to me. That's the goal we want. And if that's clear enough to you guys, then we're good with that. So let's scroll down and see what we have for content below there. The A, B, and C for a header and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So the header asks the question in the minds of many learners, why do I need this course? And that's fine. A little wordy, and I put that in there myself. So it says, this slider text, this lesson introduces the relevancy of team building. Continue to the next slide to learn more. Okay, so put your cursor on text document because that should really be C. No, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Put it before text, yeah, and hit return.
It ends. Yeah.
Now, I also need to talk about, we say this lesson introduces the relevancy of team building. I would instead, I would say this lesson addresses the question of need, and I would leave it at that. Since the header says, why do I need this course, we don't have to be more explicit as to what that need is. So that is fine. Then this text document provides a simple introduction to the scenario. This document will host the scenario. So yeah, the point that, and I wrote this myself, the point here is we're trying to clarify that we need a text document to simply orient the learner to what they're going to be doing, instead of just putting instead of just placing an icon for the video and an icon for the discussion. We want to introduce them to just sort of put some content in there that explains what they need to do. So there's not a whole lot of, there's not much content at all on that, but it's something like this lesson includes a scenario and a discussion to help you address the question about need for this course, right?
Okay.
So that's kind of what the slider text is. Very simple. The big burden's going to be, so let's scroll down and look at the images. So and the question that has to come through your mind as you're reviewing this is, ask yourself, if you are the storyboarder, does this tell you what I've just said? Does it say enough to let you know what you need to do? And if it doesn't, then something needs to be added to that on the text document. The next item is images. Scenario images provide a visual support for the scenario. The images need, of course, to be consistent, a consistent background that can't be so much devastation that there's. So this is kind of confusing because people don't even know what we're talking about when it comes to devastation. The fact that we're talking about a hurricane is really something that's going to be determined in storyboard. I'm simply, these notes that I put in here are for people who already know what the scenario is going to be, and that's kind of silly because at the strategy case, we're not supposed to be dictating things like that.
Okay.
So that probably needs to be, for the sake of clarity, especially to people like Patricia, we need to be careful that we don't give them a bad example where they start talking about what you're, where the strategy document starts telling the storyboarder what their scenario is going to be. In the storyboard, we've already determined that it's going to be a hurricane, and so as far as images are concerned, we're going to need a thumbnail for that scenario. And that could be, as Alan has talked about, it could be a high-level picture looking down on a neighborhood. But remember that the devastation you see in your pictures need to be consistent with what you would expect for the scenario. The scenario is going to be people who are going to work together to be able to get by with what they have in the neighborhood that they're in. Whereas if you're showing a picture of devastation so severe that all you have is toothpicks, there's not a whole lot that they can work together to do, except maybe make a life raft.
Right.
So we want to be consistent with our story, because our story is going to be showing people who have, one guy's got a generator, but he doesn't really know what to do with it. Another one has wood to put on windows, but he's not really strong enough to put it up himself. Another one has broken windows, but no wood to put on, but they've got strong people who could help. You know what I mean? So our story should tell you something about the background that's needed. And so we want to make sure that our background pictures are consistent. Also, when we have characters talking, it'd be great if we were looking straight onto them, on their face, but the background has to be different from the one they're talking to. So if you flick from one character to another, the background should be different because they're looking a different direction. So in other words, images need to be consistent with the scenario, and we can take that, the words after scenario, we should probably take that out. It's good information for those of you who are making a scenario.
So all of this here needs to go?
Just the part at the end of that sentence. So that's a compound sentence. Take the second half of that compound sentence out, or put it, what I do is do a Control-Z and put a strike through on that part.
Okay.
So put a
strike through.
So go up to Format and select Strike Through. There you go. So, and then you might put a comment on that and say, this presumes, no, just highlight that, or just double click on sufficiency.
Double click on sufficiency, okay.
Yeah, okay. Now right click, select comment.
Comment, where are you? Right there.
There you go, yeah. So this isn't a comment for the discussion, it's simply clarification. And just start typing in, you can't see your comment, but just start typing in saying, this crossed out content is encroaching on storyboard duties.
Yeah, I don't even know if I'm spelling encroaching correctly because I can't see what I'm typing.
Oh yeah, you're saying you don't know that whether you're spelling it right?
Well, I can't see what I'm typing, so.
Well, you can see it if you scroll to the right.
Okay. Oops.
You should have a scroll bar on there on the bottom. Do you have a scroll bar on the bottom of your screen?
No, maybe if I move it up a little. Oh, there it is. Crap. Let's see.
Yeah,
when I moved it up, I saw it.
It's the wonderful Windows that's helping you by doing things for you. I don't know why we're not seeing that, but
yeah, maybe.
Oh, I know how to do it. Go up there and click on comments.
Where?
Up by the icons of people looking at the document.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
So there you go. Somewhere in there, Your comment should be on the very. It should be on the very top.
It isn't. It's Marcus's. So maybe what I didn't.
Okay, scroll down to the bottom. So maybe it's on the bottom. I think that's stupid if it's on the bottom. But,
nope, it isn't.
Okay, scroll back to the top and click plus, and say crossed out information is encroaching on storyboard duties.
Encroaching. How do you spell crouching? Is this correct?
Yep, that's correct. It's good enough for me anyway. D-U-T-I-E-S. Duties.
Duties. Okay, I didn't hear the end of what you said.
That's all right. Okay, and then click post comment. Yeah. Okay, good. So let's scroll down a little bit more and look at what we've got. Let's go back to where we were. There you go. Okay. So we just need to make sure that we make a note saying, well, it says images of characters can be placed on layer over situation. That's fine. You will learn about this in storyboarding. I think after that parentheses down there, after the storyboard, close parentheses, or close, yeah, parentheses. Put your cursor there.
It seems like something's missing here. Where you will develop as you you will develop as you storyboard. It makes sense now. You want it here at the end of the parentheses.
In fact, yeah, you put it after the parentheses. Once you start a new sentence.
Okay.
So what you need to put here is just that there will need to be a thumbnail for the scenario. And whatever images are necessary for the scenario. Okay. Now, I think that once, and you might put a note in parentheses saying this will become more clear when you agree on a script and storyline. And then you should probably say in storyboarding.
Okay. Is this supposed to be one word?
Don't worry so much about worrying about whether everything's correct and all that, correct spelling or anything, because this is just our notes. This is not content or anything.
It's the teacher in me. I can't help it.
Yeah, I know. And I'm looking over your shoulder here, so it makes you self-conscious. I know. So close that parentheses. There you go. Now it says scenario. Learners should be able to see that elements to solve the problem are there, but that individuals are not seeing the group. What is that? I don't know what we're seeing on the right.
Group resources.
Okay. Learners should be able to. I think we should rephrase this to say that the scenario should present a story with a problem and have resources available that the learner may or may not recognize, but would be available if the team, for everybody to solve their problems, if they could work together.
So we taking out the first sentence?
Nope, I think that learners should be able to see that. I'd stop right there for a minute and let me add on. So learners should be able to see that there is a problem. They can't be solved individually, but could be solved. What's the word we want to say? In response to individually, but means collectively. Let's say collectively. And then put a period there. And I want you to say, The scenario presents a problem. I got to take a phone call for a minute though. But the scenario presents a problem without solving it. Hi, Perry.
Did I reach you at a convenient time?
Well, I'm in a meeting right now, but that's all right. You're important.
Okay, sorry for the delay on getting that form to Julie. I did get that emailed over.
All's well that ends well. I'm working on the form now.
Okay, I'll let you know once I get it back and it's submitted. I'll check it back with you once I've submitted it because we got to get it done tonight.
Okay, so as soon as I get through with the meeting, I'll get back to finishing the form. I'll send it over to you, and you can let me know if there's any issues. Okay?
Just need the signature pages and we're good to go.
Yeah, there's like 7 pages in it, right?
That sounds about right.
Okay, I'm working on it.
All right, thank you, sir.
You bet.
Sorry for the delay.
No problem. Bye. Okay, so what we want to make sure that they understand is this scenario is supposed to present a problem because we want the learners to see that this is a problem. One thing we want to point out is that delete everything up to the part where it says the. So get rid of the rest of that up to the. Right there, yeah. Let go of that. The scenario presents a problem that learners can see themselves facing or experiencing, whatever. Not that they expect to face it, but they can imagine themselves in this issue. It should telegraph opportunity as well as difficulty. All right, so I think this is good. Can anybody see anything that is needed beyond this to help create the scenario?
I should be able to see that this problem can be solved. Can be solved. So
I get the sense that Leslie and Alan have sort of mentally checked out on us. Is that right, guys?
I'm hanging in. I'm listening.
Okay,
well,
but
I'm here too.
Except that Alan's watching TV or playing with his cat.
I don't see anything that could be added on to you guys.
No.
Now, the hard part here is that unless you're actually in the thinking process, unless you're thinking of yourself in the storyboarding phase, you won't recognize what's missing here. Right. So, I'm not saying that I can see it any better because, like you, I'm not in the storyboard phase at this very moment, so my brain's not looking this direction. But, on the discussion, it says we can assume that this is good for the moment. Under discussion, it says craft a question that supports realization of the power of collaboration. What we really want to do here, that doesn't make sense. We don't care about realization of the power of collaboration. We really want them to see the importance of this course. Let's put it this way. The discussion is supposed to bridge the gap. It presents a story, and the discussion is to ask a question and get them to talk in response to that question. But the goal is that through that process, they come to this realization that the aha calls for, that if this course can help me solve this problem, then I'm in for it. I want to be here, right? So we need to make a statement here explaining to them that this discussion is supposed to bridge the gap. The scenario simply presents a situation, a story, but we want to ask a question and through that will support discussion that will help them bridge that gap. That's the bar that we need to put up for this discussion. And that's the kind of guidance that you need when you have to make a discussion question or design an activity of any kind. You need to understand what that activity needs to accomplish. And in this particular case, what it needs to accomplish is closing the gap between the story and the conclusion that, yeah, I can use this course. So we could ask questions like, the question might be, you can see that there are resources available to solve every problem, but they're not in the hands of every individual. Would you be able to to solve this situation so everybody could solve their problems? Something like that. And it could even be, how would you do this? But ultimately, through the facilitation, we're going to prompt them to realize they're really not equipped to make it happen, and it would be hard. So that the result would be that, as a result of this course, they are equipped to make it happen, if ever such a situation occurs. Were you in the meeting, Daphne, in the past when I told the story about that was in the news about the family that was stuck in the rapids in the tide at the beach, and were drifting out, and they couldn't get back to shore, and there was a grandmother there who had a heart attack, and the whole family was in danger of dying, and there were people on the beach who wanted to help, but people who went out to help them people kept going out to try to help them, but getting added to the group of people who were in trouble.
So was this the human chain story?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the beauty of that human chain story was someone had to have the ability to say to their people around them, hey guys, we could solve this problem if we could work together here. There's no time to go to look for a rope. There's no time to call for the Coast Guard. These people will be dead by the time those things are accomplished. But we ourselves, if we work together, could create a rope. Who's in? So whatever our scenario is, which we already determined and have already made, the goal of that scenario is to present a situation where a similar realization has to be made, and a certain amount of interaction needs to happen to get people to work together. And so this comments after the word discussion here, the guidance needs to help our storyboarder understand what that discussion needs to accomplish. So what do you think we should put in there?
Perhaps the question is supposed to be.
So the first thing I would say, don't say, I would overrule what's already there, probably written by me. And I would say, this activity, I wouldn't delete it yet. So don't delete it yet in case.
Strike out, maybe?
No, just put your cursor ahead of it and let's start putting in what we think should be there, and then we'll consider whether there's anything to use. So what I'm going to say is, this activity needs to close the gap between the problem that the scenario presents and the awareness that we are not generally equipped to bring about the kind of collaboration that would solve that problem.
Oops.
And I would put probably in the parentheses after that. I would say, note that the resources exist to solve the problems, to meet needs, let's say, to meet needs collectively, but not individually. And actually, don't close the paragraph yet. Say, and it's clear that this group of people do not have a history of working together. By the way, we should point out, I guess I should say, instead of saying note, we should point out that instead of note, say the scenario will do this. We'll indicate resources, indicate that resources exist. There you go. There you go. Okay. So then I would put a quote, I mean a close parentheses there after that, before that period. I'll put it before the period. And put the period after that. And then I get rid of the period before your parentheses.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm not sure about this. Craft a question that supports realization of the power of collaboration. The focus on this course as well as the difficulty of attending. I get rid of that last sentence. All right, so I think this is good. But you see the challenge that we're trying to get across here. And concept 1, we didn't need to do any of this because it was the aha is simply the learner understands what course they're in. You know, they're not going to say to themselves, I was looking for the course on quantum physics, and this apparently isn't it. They don't have to wait around to find out if this is it. That's the goal, that they understand this is the course on team building. And the aha for the third concept in Module 1 is very simple. The learner has an idea of what they'll be doing in this course, or what's ahead, right? And we don't, so the slide header here says what's ahead, and the slider text says this lesson introduces what the learner, it's kind of clumsily written, probably written by me, but so one thing you have to do is look at this stuff is remember a lot of what we're putting in here is a placeholder. So this lesson introduces I'd probably say this lesson provides a thumbnail sketch of what to expect in this course, something like that. And I would save in this course, but
of what the learner
how about what to expect in this course? So back up and say of what to expect in this course. Okay, and I even changed this to from. Well, change in to from. That may not be right, but
this is what I expect from this course.
Yeah, I think that's a little clumsy, but you guys can think about it and make it right. But things to remember. You may put this in here now, and then as a team at Storyboard, polish it and make it better. So for example, what's ahead is another example that you may say, you know, I think we can do better with that. But I'm not saying that you have to. I'm just saying keep in mind that we're not writing this stuff in stone, because this is not about creating content. The most important reason why we're putting things in here at this point for header text and slider text is to make sure people understand the standardized approach. So the part this lesson does something, and then continue to the next slide to learn more or something like that. And we have to be careful. This one looks like it's deviating from what's later. So I think the rest of them say, continue to the next slide, click the next slide to continue. I think that's what it says. So we need to be...
Actually, we do have that consistently throughout. Continue to the next slide to learn more.
That's fine. As long as you're consistent in that, I'm okay with it. Okay. So let's go to the next module. We'll go just one more concept after. So the introduction is, so far, it's the same. The learner understands that this module will focus on how we define team building. And that's not accurate. It says the learner understands that this module focuses on basic definitions for the subject of team building. So it's not just about defining team building. So I think it would be simpler to say this module focuses on foundational definitions for the subject of team building. And then I'd get rid of the rest. Very good. Okay. Header is not, let's see. The header is the module title. And I'm not sure if defining terms is the right one, but you know, for now that's what it is. And we haven't put in here the, I think what I've put is the slider detail text, a colon after text, and we should put a statement here using our standard format. So that's what we should put in here at this place. Can you highlight applies the standard ordering for module intro with variable edit for topic? So delete that, and let's look further below and see if we've got the correct text to cut and paste up here. Let's see if we can go to the third module.
Same thing.
It's not there. Okay, so so highlight where it says this lesson introduces the social contract and its relationship with trust. Just highlight that. Not there. Not there. Down where it says for B.
For B.
Yeah, slider text. Just highlight the whole thing. We're not going to use it all, but do Control C and let's paste it back up on 2 and edit that. And so put this module, so change lesson to module.
Excuse me, guys. I have to go. My son's on the phone from Osaka.
Why don't you just tell us you hear your mother calling?
Bye.
Bye, Alan. Thanks for hanging in there. Okay, so this module introduces the social contract. So I want you to say that I'd say after introduces, look for wording from up above. In fact,
module introduces. Oh, so go back up.
Yeah, no. I'm sorry. Scroll back down to your aha.
Okay.
So, team building as it applies to this course. No, that's not quite right. Where are we going here? This module introduces basic team building concepts. Let's put it that way. And then put a period there. Remove the interim words. No, I'm sorry. Do Control Z. I want you to save that last part.
Okay.
Because we're going to. So, in this case, yeah, continue to the next slide to learn more. That's great. So that's the first concept. Let's look at the second one. Defining team building. The learner understands that team building, as it applies to this course, is something. What is that? Is the art of
drawing
others to join you in common effort for a shared goal. The learner has a sense of how our definition differs from other definitions of team building. And when I say that they have a sense of that it differs, doesn't mean we need to go into a great deal of discussion about other definitions. It might be a question like, what did you think team building means? And how do you think this definition differs? So a discussion about, that, a discussion question, just like I just said, would accomplish that goal. So, so the thing I'd say is, somewhere in here, don't make the mistake when it comes to detailed text, don't make the mistake of talking about other definitions of team building. So let's see. This lesson introduces a definition of team building. And again, where we say down there on B, this lesson introduces a definition of team building, we need to point out that our definition of team building is not the definition of team building. It is the definition of team building within the context of this course. So in other words, it's sort of a unique definition of team building. It's not. We're not defining this. This is not. We don't want to open up an argument between what the dictionary says team building means and what we're defining it as.
Okay, so should we add within the context of this course?
As I'd just say, as defined for this course. There you go. That's good. And here we have to correct where it says continue to the next slide to learn more, because that doesn't belong there. At this point, we have to say review the content below and join the assigned activity. You understand why we have to do that, right? Because we got things we want that they have to do on this page before they click to the next page. They won't learn anything if they keep clicking to the next page.
Yeah, true.
So one of the things missing here is that it can easily forget what the component is you're doing. I suppose it's a simple matter of looking up there above, but I would worry about that. Normally we would have, the definition of what it is we're talking about. And you guys can choose what you want to do with that. I'm not going to make more work for you. So KW definition of team building, team as a group. So here somebody's putting in the content. That doesn't belong there. A team as any group of people cooperating to achieve shared goal. That would be a definition of a team, but we're not asking about the definition of a team anyway. So whoever put that in there got the wrong thing, right?
So this would go on the storyboard.
It doesn't belong here. It's not addressing the need that the strategy document needs to address. The strategy document needs to answer the question that the storyboarder says, okay, what am I supposed to do here? And the guidance we should be giving them here is we just need to give them a simple understanding of their job. This text document simply gives a description of what we mean by team building. So it's not up to us here to explain what that is, but we want to let them know what it is. And then we want to remind them, don't make the mistake of going beyond this definition and talking about why this definition is, why this component, why team building is important, the effect it has on your life or anything like that, because those are other concepts that we're going to address. Right? So
we can delete this.
It absolutely has no place here. Do you guys understand? Anybody wondering why it doesn't have any place there?
No, I think I understand that this strategy document just gives the storyboard a direction. So you're not putting, that would be part of content.
Right.
Yeah.
They can get their content from the SME. And so whoever wrote that was making up content, was trying to divine what the content should be. And you get into trouble when you do that. So what happens when you're an SME and you see your instructional designer making up content that isn't correct, you feel like they're stepping on your toes and they're going into your territory, right? So your SMEs will be offended if you do that. And very often, what seems perfectly logical for you to put in there is not what they want you to put in there. And it's a matter of you not being on the same page with them. So when they're not giving it to you, no matter what it is, meaning of life, whatever, anything at all that the subject seems as clear as day, ask them what they want in there. What is it you want to have us express? Our job is not to make up content, but to express it in an efficient and effective way so that learners walk away with it and are changed as a result of it. So our job has to do with expression. Their job is about what. You know, they tell us what is, and we make something of it. So when we find ourselves making up content, we're stepping on their ground, and that is going to hurt your relationship with them. Now, there are times where they will ask you to make up content. Do some research on that. Find some stuff for me. You know, that's a different situation. It has happened very rarely in my experience, but it does happen on occasion. I can think of one case where I created a course where I created the content, and that was on pandemic influenza, and the subject was something people felt back in 2008 that it was necessary to have. We were all worried about a pandemic occurring, and we needed to prepare the organizations to be able to function in those situations. So I was supposed to create a course about what the heck it was and the threat it presented and that sort of thing. But there was no subject matter expert to tell me what it is you were talking about. They just said we need a course to orient people on this impending risk, this big, disaster that could come our way. So I had to do the research and create it. But that's a very unusual situation. Normally, we're working with engineers, with production managers, people who know exactly how things are done, and they don't want you to figure it out. They want you just to listen and do what they tell you when it comes to defining content. So I'm just warning you guys, the natural inclination is to say, well, I don't want to be lazy and ask them to tell me what the content is because I can figure it out. Well, no, you can't. Don't try. Okay. So under the KeelWorks definition of team building, you might make a note saying, check the SME document for this content. You don't actually have to put it in parentheses. You're giving them direction. Then put a period and say, stay within the limits of definition. Don't go beyond this. Your goal is to be clear, and if one sentence is sufficient, stop there. Volume. It needs to be very clear to people. We want to make sure the storyboarder doesn't make the mistake of trying to fill up the page. I don't have enough content here, so let me say it 4 different ways.
Okay. And
by the way, I know I talk that way, so don't copy me. So I know that it sounds crazy for me to say things like that, and then you're saying to yourself, well, he does that. No. It doesn't make it right. Okay, so we have to. So you have to be thinking about what, if you were in the shoes of the storyboarder, what misconceptions might you have? Where might you go wrong? And how can you, as the strategy person, help them? And believe me, all of us, I don't care how much experience we have, can go off on a tangent or can get lost. We can start going beyond boundaries because we forget where we are or what we're doing. We're working hard and we're trying to knock it out and we're trying to be fast, and we forget that we already passed the line of where we needed to go about a half hour ago, And if we're not looking at our strategy document, and if our strategy document isn't giving us enough information, we get into trouble. So that's what our goal here is. Give them as much help as possible. Now, one thing you want to ask yourself is, and this is pretty early in the course, so it's not going to happen, but you might ask yourself, is this concept building on something we taught earlier? If that's the case, we want to connect with that. Because our content in any course needs to interconnect. It needs to have, it's kind of like a hand with the fingers entwined, right? You don't want to have a course that has a whole bunch of pages that are interesting of themselves but don't necessarily notice each other. It's like a bunch of strangers in an elevator. A course that's like that, there's something wrong with that. It just doesn't work right. And all of the content in this course, there's certain interrelationships, and at times you want to reflect on those. Right now, we know that doesn't happen because this is the first teaching concept we have in the course. But later, as you go into other concepts, keep your eye out for that. Think about, how this builds on another. And that kind of information, addressing that or reflecting on that, helps the learner put everything in context and see the bigger picture. So that's the kind of thing I want you guys to think about. Now, we're going down to D now, and I'm going to stop at the end of this concept. So it says, provide an image that will help the user visualize the definition of team building as defined in the HTML text teaching content. I think you can simplify this. Help the user visualize the definition, and you could even stop at the end of definition, clear out the rest of that. I guess it's the important thing here is that we're about to delete is the point it's making is it needs to, I guess I go ahead and hit delete and then type remember this. Well, it actually does say here the image needs to cooperate with the teaching text to support comprehension. So the image and the text need to interact together, and that's what this next guide is trying to say. So it needs to offer more than a vague nod to the subject. It could be metaphoric, but in that case, be sure that the teaching material also applies that metaphor in its explanation. That's an example of how they work together. Now, I don't know that the storyboarder will grasp all this, but that's what we're trying to say here. Ultimately, the image needs to contribute to the art of drawing. I don't know what the heck that is saying.
Oh, the art of drawing others to join.
Right. Well, and you might put so put in parentheses after that, after goal. And whenever I put a parentheses after something like that, it goes within the sentence.
Okay.
Because this is a parenthetical. It's kind of like a comment about the comment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what you want to say here within this parenthetical phrase, we're saying the message in the HTML document. Then you put your period after that. And in this case, I would not capitalize the. Yeah,
I was thinking that.
And the reason why you capitalized is because you thought it was going to be a complete sentence in there, but this is really just parenthetical to the sentence before.
Okay.
So I think that's a good way it is. And the assignment activity, ask a question that gets the learners to explore the relationship of team building and life and sex. That is incorrect.
Incorrect.
Because this is not about life success. That is the concept after this, right? So I would say ask a question that gets the learners to explore the difference between our team building definition and a more common definition of team building. So the reason why we would want to ask them to do that, we want to question their activity to do that, is because in distinguishing the two, they come to a better understanding of what it means.
Okay, oops. To explore the definition.
The difference between our definition of team building and more typical definitions of team building. By the way, I really am actually exceeding the grounds of strategy guidance here, because I'm actually defining a definition here. We should probably offer this as a suggestion, which again is really not the role here, and I'm violating the rules by doing this. We should have explained that the goal of this activity is to help them grasp our definition. So at the beginning, so before the word ask, and this one, put your cursor before the word ask, yeah, and say the goal of the activity
Okay.
The goal of the activity is to help the learner gain a deeper understanding of our definition of team building. Period. And then say suggestion, colon, or even, actually it might be better to say example. That way we're not making the suggestion, we're not stepping on their toes, we're not telling them what to do. Ask a question that gets the learner to explore. So, you see what we're doing here? When I said the goal of the activity is to help the learner.
Okay.
And so I've told them what the goal of this is. Now, can you think about anything they have to worry about in this discussion? I think what I would say as a caution, I would say be careful about open-ended questions.
In the assignment activity?
Yeah. Any idea why I say that?
Be careful of open-ended questions. Well, I guess when you ask open-ended questions, it may lead people to kind of go off topic, or
exactly.
There's too many variations of answers.
Exactly. As a teacher, you would be very much aware of the risk of an open-ended question. Now, you know, we're always inspired to ask open-ended questions to get people to open up and talk. Yeah, that's great. But as teachers and designers of teaching, we need to maintain control of the direction of the activity. And if we have an open-ended question, we may lose control. So I'm going to assume our people have enough sense to either ask me why, ask the community, why should we be careful of open-ended questions? Probe deeper if they don't yet understand why. But that's the reason why. Because open-ended questions cede control to those answering. And once you lose control, it can be difficult to regain it. Mm-hmm. You and Leslie probably have been in the classroom and understand that, but it's even more difficult when you're talking about e-learning. Because the ship turns much slower in e-learning. In a classroom, you can take a stick and whack it on a table.
Yeah.
And you got their attention. But in e-learning, you could type all day and you might not get their attention until next week. Mm-hmm. So, okay. So that was the assigned activity. It says discussion encourage constructive conversations using examples given in the previous activity. Ask learners to review. So I think I would remove the first sentence there. Encourage constructive conversations using the examples in the previous activity. Again, that's actually doesn't make any sense because it's not telling what our purpose is. The second activity is a discussion. There's actually two activities. The first activity is directing the learner to answer a question. The second activity is peer review of responses to questions. So basically, the second activity is to debate. Now, if you'll notice, in discussions online and elsewhere, we ask a question, and the majority of learners simply answer the question but ignore their peers, right?
Right.
Our goal is to get them not to ignore their peers, to correct their peers, to jump in and debate and argue in a peaceable way. And by the way, that part of a group we can easily control. We will have a standard of behavior that's acceptable with clear direction of what would happen when there's a violation. And what would happen in a violation where someone is abusing to someone, and we would immediately disconnect their connection to discussions. They would no longer be able to participate until we got their attention and agreement not to act that way again. So abuse isn't tolerated, and we have a way to handle that. But we're going to encourage respectful debate and challenge. So the second part of the activity is separate from the first. I mean, they're somewhat connected, but they're two distinct tasks. Answer the question, then debate other people's responses. So, the facilitator's job in all this would be interesting. We probably need to also have notes for facilitators, but we have never thought about that to this point. But the facilitator's job is going to be to help draw all the different opinions together with a goal that they understand it the way we want them to understand it. So, all right. So I think that's enough for tonight. I'm sorry that I've dragged this on so very long. You guys are staying up very late, and I hope that you aren't so completely sick of my voice by now.
My question would be, like, okay, so ultimately you want us to be able to do this independently of you.
Exactly. Right.
How would we arrive at some of, like, you're able to look at this and come up, figure out right away, like, doesn't belong here, or this should be worded this way. How would we get to that point?
Well, it would be great if you could have asked me why something doesn't. I tried to explain at different times why I took something out, but primarily, sometimes we took it out because it's dictating content instead of, talking strategically.
Yes, that part I understand.
Okay, and another reason why we took some things out or rewrote things is because we added things that weren't there. We added things like here's the intent of this component. This is what this component needs to accomplish in order to get the aha. So if you look at any aha for a concept, then you have all these different components. Some components are simple, like the header and slider text, they're very simple. And even the teaching text, it just simply gives facts, right? But the images, those aren't as simple. And we need to make sure that our storyboarder has a reminder of what it's accomplishing. Even the simple stuff, like the definition, we need to help our storyboarder remember that it is simple. It's just a definition. Don't take it any more than that. Don't go beyond that, And then we want to remind them, give them what they need. Don't feel like you have to fill up the page. Don't keep talking once you have expressed what needs to be expressed. Boy, wouldn't it be great if I learned that. Anyway, you understand what I'm saying? Now, the criteria, if you look at the criteria, it should help you. Everything that I've been doing here should sort of correlate with this criteria. If it doesn't, then you need to call me on that. Now, in the case where the activity, one of these activities, I said I went beyond what I was supposed to do. So, for example, here, this is the one where I was telling them, I was actually giving them an idea of how to achieve their goal, right? So really, I step beyond the bounds of this strategy document, where we say the goal of the activity is to help the learner gain a deeper understanding of the KeelWorks definition of team building. That is good. And the example is not a bad idea to give an example, but you really want to be careful that you don't try to steer the direction of how we teach what we're going to teach, because in doing that, we're doing that alone, whereas we hope there's a more collaborative approach in the storyboarding phase, and we may be steering them a direction that's not the very best direction. So we want to be careful about that. So we should, you know, the storyboarder should look at this as one possible way to do it, and then be asking themselves what other ways could be done. So I want to discourage people in the strategy thing from doing what I did here. Give an example. I did exactly what I said happens to us in storyboarding. Here I am doing this strategy, and I forgot the limits of what I was doing, and I got excited about what I was thinking about here, and I started to give an example. So you're thinking, what's wrong with that? You know, well, what's always wrong with jumping ahead is that we don't do what we're supposed to be doing well when we're doing something that belongs, you know, supposed to be done at the next stage. It always happens that the result is that what we really should be focusing on, we're not doing very well. So it's always problematic when we do that. Also, it's just a bad form